sheltered in a little bay, North Cape. It's my watch, and so I'm on the helm. And we're just going around North Cape. So this is actually the most northern point of the land. So we're just moving out from where we are, where we've been quite sheltered, and going to head around to Spirit Bay or thereabouts. And you might be able to see on the chart here, you can see where we are with the green arrow. Around circles the rock, and I'm just making our way around that.
Kia ora. Kia ora Tane.
Kia ora.
You are, I see, you are on a mission here, on a boat. I see a blue sky.
Yeah.
You look summery. How are you?
I'm good, very well. Very, very well.
So you're on a
Sitting
boat,
here
right?
I'm on the boat, yeah.
Ah, nice.
Sure.
Thank you for having time, for a little bit of time for this conversation, and as you know, I have these ongoing thoughts, and I move it in my mind, I move it in my heart, I move it in all possibilities I have in myself, questions around who am I, why am I here on this earth, what's the purpose of life, and what does it mean to live in sovereignty, and what means self-determination. And it's been always a very important question for myself, and I would say nearly my whole life it turns around what is freedom, what does it mean to live in freedom. And interesting, because both I associated quite often freedom and boats, and this feeling of just sail away and being not attached anymore to these things we experience on land. But I'm sure that even on a boat there are some restrictions, things you have to know, things you can do and you can't do. And so this is our conversation today about these questions. Who are we as a species? Who what does it mean to walk the path of sovereignty, and what are the things we can do and we can't, and also what others are they allowed to do and what not, and where's the borderline where we say enough is enough. So what am I allowing others to do, and when do I stop others to do such and such? And this means, of course, that we have to fill out our space, our own space, to be able to say, hey, yes or no, and to know when it's a yes, a clear yes, and a no, and when it's appropriate. And so you are on a boat, you are having an interesting, you are already since, I think a few days on your journey with a few people, and I would love to hear, where are you and what's going on?
Okay. Oh, lovely. Thank you. It's great to speak with you. Well, right now I'm in Port Taranaki on the west coast of Aotearoa, and we have just sailed from the Bay of Islands up around North Cape, the northernmost tip of the big island, Te Ika Maui, and around Cape Reinga, past Spirits Bay, which has particular spiritual significance, and then down the west coast in the Tasman Sea. So the Tasman Sea's typically a difficult ocean. There's not many people that sail down this way, and so we've come down here to Port Taranaki, New Plymouth, and either tonight or tomorrow morning very early we will set sail for Wellington, and that's another 170 nautical miles, and it'll take us about 30 hours. So that's where we are at the moment, and just enjoying a little rest. It's been quite a journey. some rough seas, some 5-meter swells, water crashing over the boat. But she's a very good seaworthy boat, built in Canada, 27 meters or 86 feet, and very, very seaworthy, very comfortable. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we're heading to Wellington.
Yeah, yeah, I heard about. So you left. You're heading to Wellington. That's interesting. I mean, from the Bay of Islands to Wellington, there's a direct way. You could just take State Highway 1 and going on. Why on a boat? What's that?
Well, the thing is, were you, with your introduction, you talked about the path of self-determination, the path of sovereignty, and it's really important.
You're breaking
Road, we're traveling on a postal route. We're traveling on a construct. Even though the native people years ago had those pathways across the lands, what we're doing here is that we're challenging the maritime jurisdiction. And by sailing, we are going under our own power on our traditional waters and challenging the Maritime Admiralty jurisdiction by traveling under our own flag. So it's a land-sea flag, so we could go on the land, but particularly it's important that we go to the ports and exercise our right to enter ports and to navigate our waters. That's really it. You know, if we cannot navigate our way around our traditional waters, our way around the world, then what does self-determination or sovereignty really amount to?
So are you saying that, sorry, are you saying that it's a natural right to travel?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is an inalienable right, the right to travel. And you know, if we did it by air, that would be the fastest. Like we could get down there in, you know, very short space of time by getting on an aeroplane. But the corporation government is a major shareholder in the airline, the only airline that operates. The corporation government is a major shareholder with local body authorities, councils in the airports. And so we cannot travel by air without putting ourselves into their jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so by doing it this way, we stay out of that. And it's a fine point to make, but it is important that we are able to travel in our own way with our own vessel in our own waters.
Okay. That's interesting aspect. What you're saying is that the ports has a significance. So I mean, I know that ports also a term in computer worlds. So it's interesting. Maybe there's even their connection why it's called port. Maybe not just by chance, by purpose eventually. But can you tell us, or can you tell me, and for the people who might want to join in a way this journey, being a bit of part of what you're experiencing, you and the others.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
the
so
meaning of a port. What is
um,
the meaning of a port, Tane?
Well, to me, the meaning of the port is where we come and connect with the land. You know, we could stop on a beach, we can stop in a number of places, but fundamental around a port is the ability to trade. And we have to be able to trade. And how are we going to be sovereign? How are we going to interface with the rest of the world? You gave the example of a computer, and the idea of ports, and you know, we're familiar with the idea of docking stations and all that sort of thing. We have to be able to load and unload our freight, and there's always been places of safe haven and safe harbor. You know, so for instance, a refugee might seek safe haven, or we seek safe haven from a storm. Safe harbor means that we can come in and we can refuel, we can get our supplies and move on. And, you know, the chiefs of these lands they ran the ports prior to European colonization. These places were places of shelter, and they belong to the people, and it is our inalienable right to use them. It's a little bit difficult to exercise our right with an airfield because we need to have a plane, we need a much greater level of investment, and it's a difficult journey. But here we can come, we can anchor, we can take our inflatable dinghies and go to the beach or go to the jetty, and we can get ourselves on and off, bring our supplies, etc.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Before, I mean,
So,
this is very it's a very good point you just mentioned with the ports, and I'm sure there's much more to talk about. I would like to, but before you go into this, I would like to ask, so you left the Bay of Islands, you're heading to Wellington, and you want to enter the port of Wellington, but there is a purpose. There is something you suggested that we have an idea why all these four. Is this just a pleasure journey, or just what is about? What you what's the aim?
okay.
Where are you going?
So the aim particularly here is to exercise rights that go back to the early 1800s or 1700s and before the rights of the native people. And so what we will be doing is that we will be in a series of meetings, and we will be in some hearings, and to do with who are the lawful owners of the lands in Wellington where the Parliament buildings of New Zealand are located. And I will be standing and representing Uanuku, along with Mihi and the hapu that we're traveling with, and family that we're traveling with. Okay. And those lands.
Questions, sorry to interrupt, but you use the word hapu. Can you just quickly tell us what means hapu?
Hapu means family. Hapu is has a multiple meaning. It's not really hapu is the primary unit in power, in sovereignty of these lands, and really it's the close group. It's around a whānau, whānau and hapu. So we are a whānau, and by whangai, by tribal adoption, I am part of Uanuku, and we will be standing, and I'll be speaking on behalf of Uanuku to remind the courts and to remind the politicians that the lawful owners of those lands are the people. And there's been issues where people have been trespassed off those lands in occupations that have happened in the last year or so. And so now is our opportunity to go and stand those rights, those inalienable rights that we have.
Okay. Wow, that's...
Now, these rights were... Yeah, I was just going to say that these rights were preserved in Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi 1840, and Article 2 gave the chiefs the exclusive right to their lands and their forests and their waters, and this was laid down. It was also laid down in the 1852 Constitution Act that the native people would always be self-governing. So we have a point to make, and so we're traveling down there to make that point.
Yeah, okay. So there's a lot to learn about. It's a very, very, very big subject.
It's a big topic.
It's a very good topic.
Yeah.
And I would like to come back now. I know, so you are heading to a court. There are going to be some meetings, and we will hear more about this later. Just if we could come back. So we were talking about the port, the meaning of being on a boat, sailing. we know there is Admiralty law. Admiralty law is the law of the sea. Would you like to share a little bit? What does that mean?
Sure. Okay, so it's really quite fascinating here on these lands, because much of what the problems that we have in this world today stem from what happened here in the early 1800s. And it was 1817 that there was an act of Parliament put through in England called the Murderers Abroad Act. Now, if you were on a sailing ship and let's say one of the crew murdered another of the crew members, they would be subject to the authority of the captain of the ship. But if they went ashore and the same crime were committed, then the captain of the ship would have no jurisdiction. So what happened in 1817 with the Murderers Abroad Act is that it was made that if you were on a British ship and you went ashore and you committed a crime, you would be liable to the authority of the captain. And that has been carried forth from there into almost all aspects of our life. So the courts today are admiralty courts. They're courts on the sea, and the judge is really the captain of the ship. And so we're all considered, or the most of the population are considered to be the crew, the employees. It's your titles like Mr. They're naval titles. They are attempts by the system of governance to put a control over the people. And there's a long history of this, and it goes back to the name that we carry. It goes back to the birth certificates, and an attempt to give us an identification which is not who we are as a sovereign individual, a sovereign man or a woman.
Okay, so are you saying that having a name and this birth certificate, especially this birth certificate is not something which always existed? Of course, no, we know it didn't always exist, but we assume it's something completely normal. We grew up with this type of certificate everywhere. When you apply for a job or whatever, so often you need the certificate. We think it's very, very normal. And what's the problem with a birth certificate? So when did this come into this, I say now, game we are in? And through who and for what purpose? What is behind this birth certificate?
Okay, so this is really quite fascinating, because it's the actual birth certificate itself came about in its strongest form in the 1930s in Germany, and I know there's a lot of Germanic peoples will be watching this. And the idea of issuing paperwork and carrying identification, etc., happened there. And then it started to creep through the rest of the Western world in the 1940s and 50s, and really became prominent in the 1950s in England and out here, and it progressed from there. And it was thought of as just a simple little piece of paper. But what's really happened is that when in the old days, when you were born, the details of that would be put in the front of a family Bible. And what's happened now is it's changed. And so, my father went off to the registrar of births, deaths, and marriages and registered my birth. And what happened is that there's several documents that go with that happened before that. And the first name and the second name, the middle name, were given by my mother and my father. But when I look carefully at the paperwork, the family name was given by the state. Now, there's a maxim in law, he who creates owns. So who created the name? And interestingly, the name is in capital letters. And the only other place you're going to find your name in capital letters is in a graveyard, because you are deceased. You are dead. In fact, what they do is they register the placenta. Now, if he who creates owns, then what that means is that the state have jurisdiction over what they create. And then we use that piece of paper to procure other paperwork, a passport, a driver's license, all of those things. And we're quite unique here in that the New Zealand birth certificate makes it very clear this cannot be used for identification purposes. And yet it is required for identification purposes. It also says that you commit a crime under the Crimes Act if you use it as true, knowing it to be false. So we know it's false. We know it's a pretend piece of paper, and it is not the living man or woman. Mm-hmm. The earlier paperwork when you were born makes it clear. And mine, for instance, has the first and middle name, but no family name or surname. Now, family comes from the word familus, which means servant of the house, or family is servant of the house, and familus originally meant slave. So, you know, your last name, capital letters, that's your slave name. And when you see your full name in capital letters, Maximus Diminutus, what is it, Maximus? I can't remember the Latin, but anyway, it's the greatest degradation of status to that of a slave that can be made. Latin, using forms of Latin called dog Latin, and what we've find ourselves in our societies these days is that we are trapped in an invisible cage because we use these pieces of identification, plastic, and we say, that's me. That's not you at all. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's not you at all. Your creator is a much greater creator than a state, a corporation state. Is that useful?
Yeah,
it's a big conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just going to go back.
Yeah,
I'll just go back and I'll repeat that last little piece, and then you can edit.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So you were saying so it's absolutely helpful, and what I see is that they somehow a kind of stage a stage exists all around the world, and we assume this is our reality. We think this is what's God given, and this is how it has to be, this is how it should be, with some, this could be a bit better, this is probably not the ideal thing, but we all, more or less, mankind believes this is normal, this is how it should be, this is a kind of like a piece of theater, and we are inside this piece of theater thinking this is how it should be. But it's like a kind of transparent fabric, and we don't see through, and something is behind and hidden. And so maybe it's it cuts out a little bit. We see why how we continue. Can you hear me again?
Yeah, I can hear you again. I'm noticing my low battery coming on, but I've still got 20%.
Oh, yeah, okay, let's see. But yeah, but it's already quite a lot of informations, and we're going to continue having interviews, and I will be part of your journey from the back office, and
absolutely.
And I mean, that's so just my last question was, are you saying that somehow there is a stage existing when we are part of a game, we are part of a kind of spectacle, and we believe this is true, but actually there's something behind, like somebody playing and pulling strings, and we think this is how it should be, but there is something hidden, a kind of, would say, hidden players?
Yes, well, look, you know, if we look historically, and it's interesting, again, we go back to the First World War, and the role of the banks in the First World War. And we can go back a whole lot further, but where this was really planned in different conventions in Vienna and other places. But what happened in 1934 is that Australia, New Zealand, and about 14 or 15 European nations all went bankrupt. They defaulted on their First World War loans, the loans they took out to fight the war. And as bankrupt nations, they could not trade. So their creditors, the banks, caused them to form corporations that were registered with the Securities Exchange Commission in the United States. And if you look up, doesn't matter whether you look up Ukraine or Hungary or Australia or New Zealand, here it's Her Majesty the Queen and Right of New Zealand Corporation, still there despite her passing. Her Majesty the Queen and Right of New Zealand Corporation that trades as an insolvent company with the permission of their creditors, the banks. So the banks are really running this show.
Yeah.
Now, that's nothing to do with you and me as men and this facade out for what it is by exercising the rights that we have. There's not all of the system is a bad thing. There's useful things in there, and there's a lot of people that need support. Yeah. And we need the systems in our society to provide support for people, but the intent behind that has to be recognized and has to be acknowledged. What is the intent of the system? Is it to gather as much possible for the masters, where we all become slaves without knowing our true identity? If you have a look at, there was an American TV serial called Roots, and there's a scene in there, a slavery scene where someone was forced to change their name. And the name is so important in this, because as soon as you acknowledge the name that's given by another, you give them authority. And when you acknowledge the name given to you by your slave masters, you acknowledge their authority.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah. So just a little thing I'd like to add is the flag that we fly under, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw it before a little bit. It was poking out behind your head, the flag.
Yeah. We've
we've
got another one here. You might see. You see that one?
Yeah. Tekara.
Right. So this flag was gifted by William IV, King of Hanover, King of England, and he gifted this flag in 1832, and it first arrived here in 1834. And when you say, we left the Bay of Islands, we sailed around Tāpeka Point. And Tāpeka Point is where the flag was gifted in 1834. In 1835, there was a Declaration of Independence, where the flag was also adopted by a new nation state. But we go back before that. We go to the original, where with the gifting of a full king's flag from Heinrich, or William IV, King of Hanover, where he gifted the full authority of the House of Hanover on a king's bench court to the chiefs and the native people here. And it's very, very significant, because this is a land-sea flag, and the only flag in the world that is not owned by the banks. And various other things that happened here through history, and we can go into detail on this later. Things I mentioned earlier, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi. The British monarchy used that treaty to claim dominion over the globe. And so by exercising this right, we're here to also protect the inalienable rights of the native people throughout the globe. And we are all native people. It is about claiming our nativity, our nativeness. We are nature. We are a part of the elements. We are a part of the wind. We come from the water. We come from the earth. We come from the darkness. We are the light emerging out of that. And so from that darkness, we create and manifest the world around us. And it's important that we acknowledge that, and we acknowledge who we are and that function that we hold and the responsibility that goes with that.
Yeah. So as you mentioned this flag, and you also mentioned the name, and I can imagine that many people are thinking, ah, it's just a tiny little aspect. This is just a name, or this is just a flag. You know, in German there's a saying, der Teufel steckt im Detail. So the devil is hidden in the
In
detail.
the detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is this something you would, through your experience, and you've been studying different topics around law, sovereignty, all these things. I mean, it's a vast, vast thing, and it's not just something you started just 2 years ago. You are on this journey for quite a while, and also the people you are sailing with. So there's lots of knowledge traveling with you. That's great. I'm happy that you have that,
Yeah.
because this is very, very important. This is one of the one of the yeah, we need to have knowledge, otherwise yeah, we're a bit lost. But coming back, what I was wanting to ask is that all these little details with the name or the flag, are these the things where it's like the pivotal moment, or the little stone which brings us to fall because we don't know them? We think it's not a big thing, but actually it is a very big thing. It's because it's small, it's big. So it's like the kind of opposition. So we believe, or we think it's not important, but it is. So are you saying that there's a big meaning on names? There's lots to learn about. I'm very curious to hear more in the next interview.
Yeah.
But could you go to the flag? Because we could think, okay, a flag is just a nostalgic little thing. It's a piece of fabric hanging around. We rise it up and we put it down. It's just a fancy thing, maybe as a little meaning, but in the past, or we show that we are this nation or that nation. So is there more about a flag than just a piece of fabric?
A flag is a constitution. A flag is how you display your lawful right, and this comes back to why we're on a ship, why we're on the water. And if you go back to the days of the sailing ships, we would use the flag to identify which jurisdiction we are in. We would identify to say, oh, that's Spanish, oh, that's English, this is Prussian, this is whatever it might be. Now, there's a maxim in law, first in law is strongest in law. So by tracing our origins back, we find the strongest points in law. I'm not talking about legislation. Legislation is what governments create for the legal fiction, the legal embodiment they create around the person. This is not about the man or the woman. And so for the man or the woman, we have to find the strongest authority we possibly can. And that authority is the flag that we fly here, that was gifted by William IV as King of Hanover and King of England. And he was known as the sailor boy. He sailed the world. He could not inherit. He had no children who could inherit. He had 10 children, but they couldn't inherit his authority. So he handed the crown of England to Queen Victoria, and the House of Hanover went to Ernst Augustus I. Ernst Augustus V is the direct descendant of that now. This is also really, really important with the death of Queen Elizabeth II and the supposed claim to the throne of Charles. And he is not the rightful heir. So if we trace things back, this is really, really significant in our world today if we stand as men and women. And we don't stand under their authority at all. We stand under our own authority, as was recognized by the gifting of this flag. This flag was symbolic that we held the authority that we're claiming today. It's a very significant it's a very, very significant flag in that sense. This is the only sovereign flag on this globe, in this world, that is not owned by the banks.
Wow, but this is a very strong statement. And it's nearly too good to be true. So that a piece of fabric has such a power. It's a constitution. It's not owned by a bank, and it's a free trade flag. And with this flag, you can travel with a boat. I could also walk. And it's like a bit of a, is it a key? Would you say, is this flag Tikara holding a kind of key for stepping out of
It's almost
this game?
it's almost like a free pass.
Wow.
It's a free pass.
Wow, wow, wow. That's unbelievable. I'm very excited. And I don't know how your phone is right now. Do you still have some before we how much time do you have?
Well,
And
let me just have a look at the battery power. I've got the top battery power. I can always get another device.
I just don't want to
so-
lose you when it becomes very interesting. It's already very interesting, but I would love to go into a bit deeper, if you can, in the meaning of this free trade flag. So if there's one flag which is free, this means that all other flags are not.
Correct.
So what's
correct? They're corporation flags.
Okay, so are you saying that all flags prior, you mentioned the year, the 30s, when this came into life of creating after the First World War, all these countries, nations were bankrupt, so they became yeah, somehow on a carrot stick. They became corporations. So, but we had flags before. What about the flags? I mean, the German flag, for example, it existed before. So, or other flags, they existed prior the First World War. So, can you explain this? I'm not quite sure if this is clear.
Okay, I'm going to be fairly quick about it because I've got a battery thing coming up. I can change devices and come back online.
Okay.
But the flag was gifted, and a lot of the information about the flag was lost, and has only really come to light in the last 20 or 30 years. And lots of research has been done. And this flag, go again in the tradition of flags. William IV held a particular ensign, the Crown and Anchor, by which, as Supreme Admiral of the fleet, he was able to issue flags. And this flag here was gifted. Now, what has happened is that various flags have been adopted at different times, and they've risen and fallen with a particular regime or a particular political whatever you might want to describe it as. But we have to make the distinction between corporation flags and sovereign flags. So we've got all the members of the United Nations who sit in the General Assembly there. They're pretty much all corporation states. And if you look up, there's a great paper written by the head of from the London School of Economics, I can't remember the guy's name, basically defining a state as a corporate entity. Mm-hmm. So we know that is a corporation. So states are corporations. But the sovereign people, and you might find that through United Nations development programs, you find some link to the indigenous peoples. The indigenous peoples are not corporations. And if you find the original flags, the original artifacts that signified their sovereignty, those are very, very significant. And flags really only took place in some parts of the world. Here, what would happen is that it would be a po. It would be a stick in the ground with feathers on it that were in the colors of the chief who was in control of a particular area. If we go and we look at in Egyptian times, might have been the obelisks. Or we go to Easter Island and we find the huge statues there. What we found with the British Crown is they went and they took those artifacts and they took them back to their country. It was almost like we take the mana, we take the life force of the people by taking their prized possessions back, and we hold it. Mm-hmm. So, it's very, very significant that we exercise these rights. So coming back and just sort of really needing to conclude fairly quickly before I lose power, we have to exercise these things, otherwise we lose them.
Okay, so to wrap it out around, I would say Tekara free trade flag. It means it's a flag for the people. It's not bind just for a group of people here in Aotearoa. And as a citizen of whatever country with a corporated flag, I have a possibility to say, okay, I want to show my sovereignty by rising up a flag, which would be Tekara, because it's free and it's there for everybody. And I would love to go into this the next time when we talk about the possibility and why somebody on the other side of the planet can use Tekara as a first step to show, to demonstrate. And then I believe it's more than just a demonstration. It's something which we can go, it's a path. But Tekara is there actually for everybody. Is this correct?
It is. It is. And, here we talk about the Maori people, but there's a distinction between Maori, M-A-O-R-I, which only came about in 1947, and Mauri, M-A-U-R-I. And, in the old German, what does Mauri mean?
Yeah, Ma.
The primordial mother.
Ma, mother, and Uri, yeah.
So we are all Mauri, and we all whakapapa. We all have ancestry to a single drop of water.
Yeah. Wow, thank you.
We all have ancestry to the darkness.
Wow, it's really beautiful. It's we have addressed many things, and I'm looking forward to having further conversations. It was just now to have a kind of introduction to see what it's about. So whoever is interested to hear, to listen, to learn more about this mission, this journey of this group of people. Tane, thank you so much for giving this this interview or this conversation, and we will, and I definitely will be part of your journey, and having this interviews in the next days to learn more, and at the same time to come closer to Wellington, to these specific days. I think you have to be there on the 28th, I believe.
We have to be there on Tuesday, and so it's getting there Monday.
Yeah. Okay. So
it's just that's.
Are you willing to give me more time and to talk and to?
Absolutely. We'll have plenty of time for that.
Very nice.
We'll talk in another few days.
Yes, beautiful. Is there anything which you would like to say, or something which is important in this moment where you think would be nice to share before the last batteries complete?
Well, the thing that really just comes to my mind is what I just stated before. If we don't exercise our rights, we have none. We must exercise the inalienable rights that we were born with. And our failure to do so is going to impact the generations to come. They will inherit our laziness. They will inherit our fear. They will inherit the cages that we create through our inaction. So, kia kaha, stand strong.
Thank you. Kia ora. That's very touching. Thank you so much.
So we've got a bit of a squall happening, and tacking out so that we're clear of the coast coming across to Cape Reinga, and sailing along, and probably in about 10 minutes we'll make it to the port side, the left side.